Well, good evening and welcome and Happy New Year. This is a meeting of the Special Education Advisory Committee of the Halton District School Board for Tuesday, January the 4th, 2022. Given the need to practice social distancing due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we're holding this meeting remotely through a video conference. This meeting is being recorded. In accordance with Ontario Regulation 463/97 and the new guidelines effective February the 1st, 2021, any meeting of the Board of Trustees and/or committee meetings which are open to the public must be live streamed and be available to take questions from the public. The purpose is to foster two-way participation during these meetings. To comply with this, SEAC will be using a Google form which is attached to each agenda distributed in advance of the meetings and posted on the HDSB SEAC website. Questions posed during live stream meetings of SEAC may be answered during that meeting, particularly those related to agenda items, or at the following meeting at the discretion of the chair. For efficiency, multiple questions received that are similar in nature may be grouped together at the discretion of the chair and/or vice chair. Questions will not be attributed. Notation will be made that multiple people ask the same question. Any questions that contain language that is hateful or discriminatory will not be considered. So first of all, Lucille, if we could start with a roll call to determine who's in attendance, and please if you could answer yes or present when your name is called. Lucille? I think you might be on mute.
Tracy, Heather.
Good evening.
Joanna.
Good evening and Happy New Year, everyone.
Thank you. I haven't seen Margot. Margot?
She's not able to attend today.
Okay. Association for Bright Children, Yalen.
I'm here. Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year. Community Living Burlington, Candace.
I haven't seen Candace.
Okay. Easter Seals, I've seen Sarah.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. I haven't seen Melissa. Is Melissa here?
No, I've not seen her.
Rebecca Huron.
Present. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Alison, Diane Vanden Bosch.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Happy New Year.
Kathy Turner.
Hi, good evening. Happy New Year.
James Baldwin.
Good evening and Happy New Year.
Diane.
Dan Miller, I haven't seen. So Dan Miller is not present. Okay, so in terms of, we obviously have Colette, and then we have staff. We have Lorna and Sean here this evening. Yes, Sean's here this evening. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Is there anybody else I've missed other than the staff that will be here giving presentations? I think we have everybody. We also have Kevin. Great. So first of all, we'll begin by honouring the land. Halton, as we know it today, is rich in history and modern traditions of many First Nations and the Métis. From the Anishinaabe to the Atawandran, the Haudenosaunee and the Métis, these lands surrounding the Great Lakes are steeped in Indigenous history. As we gather today on these treaty lands, we have the responsibility to honour and respect the four directions, land, waters, plants, animals, ancestors that walked before us, and all the wonderful elements of creation that exist. We would like to acknowledge and thank the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation for sharing their traditional territory with us. So our first step now is to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting. Are there any modifications or amendments that need to be made to the agenda? If anybody wants to indicate that, please could you let us know in the chat box. Okay, not seeing anything. If anybody would like to oppose the agenda, who would like to motion to approve the agenda? Lucille. So Tracy will approve. Anybody to second? And Diane will second. Does anybody have any opposition to the agenda as put forward? If you'd like to indicate so in the chat. Okay, not seeing anything. The agenda is approved as presented. Okay, and now we have the approval of our December the 9th, 2021 meeting minutes. Are there any omissions or errors that anybody has noticed? If you could indicate in the chat box, that would be great. Okay. None being noted. Would anybody like to approve the minutes as presented? Diane will motion to approve. Anybody to second? Heather, that's great. Thank you. Does anybody oppose the minutes as written? If you could indicate so in the chat. Okay, none being noted. The minutes are approved as recorded unanimously. So now we're going to begin with our action items for this evening. The first item tonight is an annual report from the AODA, the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act Committee, from Alison Ippolito, the General Manager of Human Resources, and Ian Godet, please correct me if that's incorrectly pronounced, the Executive Officer of Facility Services. So Alison and Ian, if you'd like to present, you're very welcome.
Thank you. I will put up the presentation. Okay. Thanks for having us this evening. For those of you I don't know, my name is Alison Ippolito. I'm the General Manager of Human Resources. And as Alison mentioned, with me tonight is Executive Officer Godet. And tonight we would like to take you through a brief presentation, which is really an overview of the annual accessibility report. It's a collaborative effort. The report is put together really by various departments in the organization and the Accessibility Committee. And so for a bit of context to the committee, it is a long-standing committee with many members, and Executive Officer Godet and I have recently taken the positions of co-chair. It was late spring 2021 that we took the position of co-chair. So we've been very excited and looking forward to continue the really great work of the committee. So as I mentioned, the report, this presentation is an overview of the report, which is really an overview of all the really great work that has taken place throughout the organization in the 2021 school year, so last school year. And it goes over some of the work that the board has done in order to meet the standards, the AODA standards, in accordance with the legislation. So for those of you that might not know what the 5 pillars of the standards are, they are information and communication, employment, transportation, customer service, and design of public spaces. So the board is compliant with the standards, and we are really in a phase of maintenance at this point, and of course improving on those minimum standards that are already set. Tonight we'll go through some of the general areas, policy, procedures, training, the employment, information and communication, and built environment pillars. Sorry, flipping between my screens to make the presentation move forward. So these are policies and admin procedures that were either reviewed and revised or were brand new in the year of 2020-2021. The first two, the employment equity policy, which was revised, and the teacher hiring practices, which is a brand new administrative procedure, were really the result of PPM 165 and the repeal of Reg 274. And these processes for the board really put diversity, equity, and inclusion and transparency at the forefront of the hiring practices, including those that identify with disabilities. The recruitment and accommodation, AP, was reviewed, and the prescribed use of assistive technology, which came into effect in 2020, really sets the it's a transparent method for the use and procurement, or the process of obtaining that assistive technology. And all of these are available publicly on the board website as well. Training and learning, of course, is a pillar of the AODA legislation, and this is a non-exhaustive list of the training that continues to take place in the organization. The training, some of the training listed here, it's not only focused directly on AODA legislation, but it has components and principles that are embedded within the training itself that go towards really raising the awareness and improving the culture around those who identify with a disability, right? So it removes that stigma by continuing these trainings. Many of them have been ongoing. For new staff, of course, they are required to do the accessibility awareness training when they're first brought on board. And then that's repeated on a cycle of every 3 years as a reminder and refresher. From an employment standard perspective, there are 3 main items that I wanted to discuss and highlight throughout tonight. I talked briefly about the new hiring practices, and as mentioned, it really puts valuing diverse perspectives, including those who identify with a disability, at the forefront of the hiring and the inclusion of them throughout the process. So hiring managers were trained in spring of 2021 on these new processes to ensure that they are implemented appropriately and that there's a full understanding of the new APs. As part of the new hiring practices, what has also been implemented is voluntary self-identification questions on the job ads. And that will assist the hiring managers to ensure that they adhere to the policies and processes. And of course, within those voluntary questions is whether or not an individual will voluntarily self-identifies with a disability as well, which is direct relevance to the AODA standards and the work that we do within the board. So that data, the data from those self-identification questions, will be really critical moving forward as well. The second bullet for staff census, as many of you might already be aware, we did launch a staff census just shortly after the student census. And it is currently the data is being disaggregated now. So as it relates to the relevancy of AODA, this will really give us a percentage of staff in the organization who also self-identify with a disability, and not only from the broad view of the entire organization, but also a breakout of among the levels of the organization and where those individuals lay and where their roles are within the board. So that will really help determine next steps and goals and plans for the coming days. And I'm sure the committee will be working with some of that information as well. And then accommodations, ongoing accommodations, of course, through our Employee Health and Wellness Department, who are well versed in the accommodation process. But as you can imagine, they very much increased last year with the context of COVID, including those who, are immunocompromised or are requiring additional PPE or additional accommodations as a result of other medical restrictions. So that was a large part of the employment aspect as it relates to AODA last year and continues to be this year, of course. And then staffing and recruiting accommodations are also provided to individuals throughout the entire staffing and recruiting process. So this includes from an application, it's on the job ad, to an interview if they require accommodations in the interview process, which are offered. And of course, if they're successful, that they are aware of their option of accommodations as an employee, as a successful candidate. Okay, I think I'll pass Ian, or you can take over at this point.
That's right. Thanks, Allison. Happy New Year, folks. Nice to meet you all virtually. As noted, I'm Ian Gaudette, Executive Officer, Facility Services and Planning, and I'm no longer new with the board. I'm coming up on 13 months, so I can't use that as an excuse, but certainly I've got a lot to learn about the Halton District School Board, and I'm excited with this portfolio. In terms of continuing on with the presentation, information and communication has achieved their compliance requirement that was required by 2021 to ensure that websites were compliant and we're using a software program called Accessibility, which provides monthly reports that indicates that we're AA compliant. As well, communications and information services work together to complete the migration of all remaining school websites to the Google Suite sites, and used an AODA standard school template to migrate that content. And Accessibility, as is noted here, is being utilized to monitor and provide those monthly updates. Next slide, please, Allison. So in terms of the built environment, certainly there's been a lot of work going on around our schools, trying to install, upgrade, and remove barriers from many school sites. We've completed several accessible washroom upgrades at Eastview, Glen Williams, Nelson, River Oaks, Surrey McMillan, and also at Nelson. We've added a new elevator at Nelson, and we've also completed elevator renewal projects at White Oaks North Campus. We've upgraded fire alarms, complete with visual strobes at Pine Grove and W.I. Dick. We've also added barrier-free enhancements or improvements through ramps or other site enhancements at Rolling Meadows and TA Blakelock at the front entrance. And then leveraging the COVID Resilient Infrastructure Stream, CVRIS funding. We've been able to leverage that funding to provide 56 new accessible outdoor learning spaces across our region. And these are being built to AODA compliance. And if you go to the next slide, Allison, this shows a schematic looking from the air, excuse me, of one of the classroom options that's being implemented outdoors. The circles around the perimeter are trees that we hope to plant, but the focus of the effort is to actually construct and create limestone pathways or asphalt pathways as may be needed on the site, along with approximately 16 armor stones. That's what's making the T-shaped or the X on the seating diagram there. These armor stones are used as seats, and they're spaced 2 meters apart from each other so that there's enough access and room to maneuver throughout the seating arrangement. And then we are supplementing these construction projects with some trees and other native plantings. And so that's what the text there indicates if you can't read it. And that's a plan view of one of the 3 options that we're installing at many of our sites. And if you go to the next slide, Allison, this presents one of the completed projects. So that shows that we've connected to an existing walkway or pathway in the bottom right, and shows the armor stone seating arrangements with that's all the limestone pathway in and around. There's some logs at the back, can also be used as seating, and then we've supplemented that with lots of plantings where we can based on the budget. And so that's been in the works, I'll say. We've completed many, but we still have many more to complete. It's been a challenging year in facility services, trying to secure products and contractors and vendors, given all the supply chain challenges as well as labor force issues. Next slide, please. And then I know SEAC has already seen this, and I apologize, but I am certainly very proud of the collaboration that I saw working on this project at TA Blakelock for the Community Pathways program. And so with that, I picked out 2 photos that I appreciate, our photographer's talents, and then also the great work and collaboration that went on to complete this project to support our students at TA Blakelock. And the next slide, Allison, shows a bit of a aerial view of the same space that I'll say when I first visited the site was quite unused. Lots of nice trees and green space, but was mostly used as a cut through on the property by passerbys, and so certainly leveraging the landscape and bringing to life a great outdoor experience for our students and our staff there at TA Blakelock. Next slide, please. And so with that, we're open for questions. I was going to say when you were reviewing the agenda, I didn't think 60 minutes would be required for Allison and I, but we're certainly happy to fill some of that time with any questions you may have that we can answer.
Great, thank you very much. So are there any questions that people have for the team? I'm gonna start with one. I was just wondering on what kind of success you'd had in terms of having individuals self-identify on the employment forms. Just wondering, how open people are prior to the recruitment phase to self-identify with any kind of minority grouping, but in particular those with disabilities.
Yeah, it's a good question, Allison, because it's something that we is at the forefront, right? When we implement both the census and the self-identification questions, it's always a concern of how to make individuals feel as comfortable as they can to bring that forward. It is relatively new at this point, so I don't have any data or stats to share with you on it. What I can share with you is that we work very hard in explaining on the job ads why we're collecting the data, what we're doing with the data, and how the data meets the anti-racism data standards as well. So in an effort to try and ensure that individuals feel comfortable answering those questions and that it won't be used against them. It is a work in progress, of course, as we know, since they are very new, and we continue to get feedback and adjust as we need to.
Great, thank you very much. Sarah.
Sorry, just had to click all the buttons there. So I'm just wondering if there's anyone on the committee who's self-identified as having a disability, or if you've had any feedback or consultation with anyone with, say, physical disabilities utilizing some of these renovations or improvements, that sort of thing.
Thanks for that question. I'm still getting to know the committee members, and I don't believe that there is anyone yet that self-identifies that I'm aware of. But we have been working in the background to do a call for public interest. We're targeting, I'll say, students, staff, and community members with lived experience that can help better inform the decisions that we're making and the improvements that we're making to ensure that we're doing as best as we can. My prior experience was with Waterloo Region District School Board, and I did hold part of this portfolio there in terms of accessibility. And we had some pretty good success reaching out to staff. And I'll say we had a former student, which was great, could tell us what some of these facilities looked like before we renovated them, but also give us advice as to how we could do better. And so that's one of our to-do items for Allison and I to work with our committee to decide on when that call will go out, and I'll say the number as well that we're looking for in terms of membership that can help make us stronger.
Thank you.
Great. Colette.
And just to add to that, following our guest speaker last month, and hearing about his experiences accessing facilities based on what he described as his invisible disability, Ian and I have had a conversation around not just looking for someone who might experience physical barriers, but someone who might experience barriers due to an invisible disability. So I think they would add some great insight to their work.
Great, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? Oh, Tracy? Yep.
Thank you. My machine is a little slow tonight, and so am I. Through you, Madam Chair, all of this is really wonderful work, and I live very close to TA Blakelock, so I can see how that project has grown and been shaped over the last little while, and it's pretty exciting, these projects. On the flip side, I get the sense that infrastructure-wise, we have a ways to go, given that our infrastructure is aging. What would you say is sort of the magnitude of where we, in an ideal world, would be getting to?
Thanks for the question, and certainly, we'd love to achieve the 2025 deadline for accessibility improvements. I'll say this based on my experience. One of the challenges is, even with the best of intentions, the code and the requirements do change from time to time. So even though we have installed many accessible washrooms, the needs change, and the code gets updated. When I worked at St. Clair College, we did a wonderful accessible washroom, and then we had a unique individual that came to us, and his wheelchair was wider than most, and his weight was such that the overhead lift wouldn't hold this individual. So we had to renovate an existing recently upgraded facility. So it will continue to be a moving target, is one of the things. So we'll need to continually adapt and go back and update what we've previously updated. I have seen a snapshot, and I can't recall the dollar value, and it's a pretty crude cut at what's required to, I'll say, remove or get at some of the priorities to support accessibility within all of our facilities. Some are pretty simple, I'll say, in terms of installing accessible parking and doing curb cuts. They're relatively simple, but sometimes we miss the mark and don't get them as close to the entrances as we should. So certainly there's opportunities for us to do better there. And so I'm currently working with my team internally to try and ensure that we've got good continuity and pathways. So oftentimes we first ask visitors to our site to attend to the main office. So getting access to the main office. Sometimes finding the main office can be difficult in some schools. So improving wayfinding, ensuring that we've got accessible door operators. So there's lots of work to do. And to your point, some of the improvements that we've done, like lifts that are key operated, are no longer a standard that we want as our benchmark. We want fully accessible elevators. So still lots of work to do. And I'm sure I could dig up the spreadsheet that gives a ballpark. I'm sure it's in the $50 or $60 million range. And unfortunately, we're not funded for that amount for accessibility, but we do try and leverage economies of scale as we get into our schools and try and get at the priority needs.
Thank you. Any other questions at this time? No? Okay. Well, I'd like to thank you both very much for presenting your work today. Obviously, as you say, there's a lot of work that is going on and will continue to go on. And as you say, these standards continue to evolve, and we will need to keep working to improve our accessibility for both those with physical and maybe invisible disabilities. So congratulations, and we look forward to hearing how it's going next year. Thank you.
Thanks very much for having us.
Thank you. Take care. Okay, so now we're at item 3.0, which is the SEAC discussion and question period. Does anybody have any questions or topics that they would like to raise? And if so, could you indicate in the chat? I'm just trying to find my way back to the screen. Okay, so we have lots of people with raised hands. So the first one I have is Kathy Turner.
Thank you. Sorry, I apologize for my dog barking at my other dog. I apologize for that. And my kids getting ready for bed. So I know somebody, I think this is a good place. She's having concerns because her son is in a Pathways program. And from what I understand, because of online learning, not for like a person I met. Anyways, she reached out because she's like struggling because she feels that her son should be, because under the guidance, it's like a communication / life skills class. She was told that they were going straight virtual, and it's not in class starting tomorrow. Oh my gosh, my puppy. So she's really concerned because her son's expressed that if he goes online, he's going to a psychologist. She gave him permission to talk about this, but that he's going to kill himself and stuff like that. Very struggling. And she reached out to the principal, and she's like, well, it's board decision, or I don't know if they said it was board decision or it was a teacher decision that they were not going to open the class.
So again, I think this is a discussion that I'm sure a lot of us would like to hear from Colette. I mean, I recognize that it's been a very rapidly changing situation in the last 24 or 36 hours. But perhaps, Colette, if you could give us some understanding of what the implications are for students with learning, for students with exceptionalities in terms of returning to school, both for those parents who maybe want to switch to virtual or those parents who want to see their children in person. So perhaps, Colette, it's a great opportunity for you to give us a bit of an update on the impact of the new restrictions.
Absolutely, I'd be pleased to. And before I forget, Kathy, if you wouldn't mind sending me an email about that for individuals' concerns, and then I can work with the school more directly. But of course, take it outside.
Yeah, I'll forward the email that she sent to me, and has all her information on it.
Wonderful. But in terms of an overview of the plan for returning to learning tomorrow, we do have a plan to support our students with special education needs within our life skills classes, our community pathway programs, our communication classes, ECPP, which is our provincial, what used to be called Section 23 schools, but for some of our most vulnerable students, as well as students in Project Search. So that's a co-op placement at the hospital. Those students will have been invited to return to in-person learning tomorrow with transportation, and ultimately will be the parents' decision around whether they would like their child to come in person or to learn remotely. And the school will provide learning in both models. For students outside of those specific programs, and really those specific programs were chosen because the profile of the student in order to access those classes is such that it would indicate that the students in those programs would not be able to access the learning remotely. So principals then consider students outside of those programs that they have in their schools that have significant special education needs, and they determine if they meet a certain criteria that has been set out by our department. And in a moment, I'll have Sean speak to what that criteria looks like. And so students who meet the criteria to be offered in-person learning are then offered also to attend in person. Transportation for those students will take a little bit more time because it's a one-off specifically arranged, but certainly an arrangement in the interim can be made between the principal and the family for the family to transport them until our transportation services are arranged for all of those students. But our goal really is to support the vast majority of students in remote learning. That is the expectation of the government, and it is the mandate that we've been given to implement. But we do want to balance that mandate with the needs of our students and for the needs of our most vulnerable students who really could not access the learning during the remote time. So I'm going to have Sean jump in and speak to the criteria that principals will apply to determine whether a student with significant needs should be invited in.
Thanks very much. And so when I go through the criteria, this isn't a checklist where there's a need to meet all of these or a specific number. It's really a conversation and a thought process with the school and what the needs of the student are. Again, placed against the safety and the health needs of the school and the students as well, recognizing that we are in a fairly significant portion of the pandemic with a lot of people, as we've even heard on tonight's meeting, being affected by the illness. So I will go through the list. The first part is the school is asked to check or to see if they've tried other interventions before bringing the student back into the school. So have we looked at how we are supporting the student in remote learning? Have we provided the additional resources or supplementary resources to help them? Sometimes schools are able to provide physical materials at home. We can get them to the homes, or the parents can come pick up the materials and try different things to see if that can actually work and the student can engage in the learning remotely. The other piece too is this really is only a consideration for students who are in-person learning now. Our students who were in virtual learning prior to this remain in their virtual learning environment. They're not considered for coming back to in-person at this point. Some of the other things that we consider are, what are the physical needs of the student? So is this a student with total physical care? What's the type of staffing that's going to be needed? Is the student on a fully alternative curriculum? So many of our students who are on Ontario curriculum receiving regular report cards, we look to supporting them in the remote learning because we can provide the Ontario curriculum programming. Alternative curriculum is a little bit more challenging, which is why life skills, communication, and CPP are considered first off, because most of those students are on an alternative curriculum and require some of the other pieces that are specific. So that's kind of the first layer. Then as schools look to the students who may benefit from coming in, what's been the success in remote learning? How have the students been responding? Have there been significant challenges interacting in the remote classroom in a meaningful way? And so those conversations happen at the school level. Again, after the supports have been in place, other things have been attempted. Is there a requirement for one-on-one support? So can that happen in the remote setting? How can we support that in the school if we do bring them back into the classrooms? How much of the students program is sensory, requiring OT support and some of those additional staffing pieces? And would the continuation of the students learning in a virtual environment cause the students' progress to significantly regress? We know that all students are going to be challenged to some degree in the remote learning as compared to in-person. But that degree varies drastically between students. And so one of the things we are looking at is regression happening, and do we need to have this student in? And then has there been significant and serious concern regarding the students' attendance and participation online? When we first began this a year ago, one of our major concerns was making sure we reached out to families if we hadn't seen the students, and trying to make sure we had contact and that the families had everything they needed in order to help the student engage online first. So there's a number of factors that we look at when we consider those students who have the need to come back into the in-person learning.
Thanks, Sean. And I would add that it's not a one decision made at one point in time, that if a principal determines that we should try first to accommodate a student in remote learning, but after a certain period of time, it's proven unsuccessful, then the decision around offering in-person learning can be revisited. So it's not that all decisions have to be made by tomorrow and then we're stuck with it for the full period of closure. It can be something that is revisited. Similarly, for parents who may choose in-person learning at the outset, and they may change their mind based on the kind of shifting environment in terms of community spread and their levels of concern. So some other points, and then I'm happy to open it up to questions. With this return, we have implemented additional infection prevention and control measures. Specifically, N95 masks have been provided by the ministry for all staff, and we're very fortunate that our shipment of masks arrived yesterday. And our amazing team in facility services and purchasing sorted that and got it all delivered out to schools today. So our staff will have the N95 masks when students arrive at schools tomorrow, as well as the rapid antigen tests, and as well as some additional measures that were put into place last time we went into a closure, such as the use of plexiglass to separate students, or depending on the student's need and profile, to provide an additional barrier between the staff and a student. They're able to spread out a little bit in the building so that there are fewer students congregated in one particular room or a few rooms. We also know that our facilities team has done a lot of work at upgrading our HVAC systems, and we have HEPA filter units in all of our schools, and our classrooms with students with special education needs have been prioritized for the use of those HEPA filter units. We are also required to reinstate the verification of the daily screening. So any student that does attend in person, or any staff, their pass on this daily screening will be verified by someone in the school each day. Some other pieces that you've probably heard about in the media that are changes are the changes in access to testing. So while we do not have access to PCR testing at the testing centers, our families and our staff do not have that access to that. We do have access to the rapid antigen test kits, so we're quite fortunate, and we do have a supply on hand, as well as we have a larger shipment coming in 2 to 3 weeks to make sure that all of the students, when they return to in-person, will have access to this testing. But for now, our students and staff in person have been prioritized with the kits that we have. And we have also PCR at-home test kits. So these are swabs that would then be delivered to a drop-off point and assessed by a lab. So while we don't have access to the testing sites, we do still have access to PCR at-home kits. And so we're quite fortunate in our sector to still have access to those tests. The isolation periods have also changed, and I won't go into great details because I'm sure you've heard about it, but for those who are fully vaccinated, the isolation period is 5 days. If they have a case of COVID or symptoms, so now that not everyone has access to testing, any symptoms are presumed to be COVID. And so this is one of the significant changes moving forward, is that there's really no such thing, or for the vast majority, they won't be confirmed cases of COVID, but what we've always called as presumptive cases of COVID. And of course, the reporting of cases. So we have had a diligent reporting protocol and communicating those cases to families. But with the changes in testing and the capacity of our public health units, the reporting of cases, the confirmation of cases, and the communication to families from public health have all ceased. So that will be a significant change for both our staff and our families. So with that, I'm happy to open it up to any questions that the group may have.
Yolene.
Hi, Colette. I think I have something that I tied to Kathy's question earlier, and so Sean responded with some criteria and moving students with special needs from online classes to in-person. But here I wanted to ask, and with a little bit a case and, give you a little bit more information on the case that a family has approached us. So this family has approached ABC, and so their child is identified as twice exceptional learner. So which means this child has is identified both as gifted as well as autistic and ADHD. So the issue is not, going online, but it's the school has asked the family to put the child from in-person self-contained class to a remote learning option. And because the school cannot provide the EA support for the student in a self-contained class. So the family is very frustrated, and because, both parents are working outside of the home, they cannot be home and supervise their child. And when it's online, and also, the request for the EA in a self-contained gifted class and is not an option, as they were told. And so so the family would like to know that, I think it's also for us to know what is the policy in the sense now under the pandemic and the option of in-person and in a class versus the online remote learning. And those are the options that the school can assign student to. So what is the policy and at the board regarding whether to move a student and with special needs, from online to in-person or from in-person to online. So Sean, explained earlier about, moving a student from online to in-person. What is the procedure or policy regarding the school wants to move the child from in-person class to online learning because the school cannot provide the support sufficient and for the child in a self-contained class?
So I'm going to respond to that outside of this period of closure. So we're talking about once all students are back to learning in person. Our approach has been really driven by parent selection, parent preference. So we do not have the authority to require a student to learn remotely when all students are learning in person. That is the parent's choice to choose that model. And then it is our duty to accommodate the in-person learning if that is the parent's choice. So we really do work with families around what is best for them in terms of their level of comfort, whether it's in-person learning or preference for learning remotely. But we don't compel students to move to the remote platform. But I do want to add that, and I appreciate that there are challenges around access to ample supports in all of our classrooms. And we know that we have many students who would benefit from additional support, but we operate within a finite collection of resources. And so our students who, kind of generate and receive educational support are students that have the most significant health and safety needs. So they are often total care students or students that for safety reasons cannot be left outside of one-to-one support and supervision. And so we know that there are other students in all of our classes that would benefit from more intensive support, whether it's through an educational assistant or another educator. But we have to operate within the finite resources of the board. And so, I just wanted to make sure that I kind of address the other half of the issue. And so our role as the special education services team is to then support the school, support the classroom teacher, and make sure that the IEP for the student is appropriate, that the strategies that are being used, both in terms of their kind of intellectual development, but as well as some of the behavior needs that they may have, are supported appropriately. And so that it would be our role to work with the school to make sure that that the student is receiving the appropriate programming on both those fronts.
So I know this is a very difficult case, and because the child is twice exceptional and with both identification. So either in a special education plan and in terms of our policy to support those twice exceptional, so the parents don't have to choose either or so either to support the child intellectual, or have to, meet the child's behavioral needs. And so either, kind of like a cross support, and other than just, gifted is self-contained is a better option. But, you cannot have EA, in a self-contained class because of the, other special needs the child, requires. So either anything that, in the policy that would support, I know those may be smaller numbers, but to support those families and students.
Yeah, and I would say that because each case is so unique, that the type of support that would be offered to the school would be really driven by that really individual case. That it would be best if again, you send me a message about this particular case and we are able to reach out with the school and work with them. So I'm thinking, for example, of our behavior analysts that have expertise in students with autism, to make sure that the strategies that the teacher is using in the classroom are appropriate for that student's profile. But ultimately, it would be really tailored to that individual student's needs, how they're presenting in that moment, and then what we would recommend in terms of support for the school. So if you want to let me know by email the name of the school, I'd be happy to have the team reach out to the school to support them.
Oh, great. Okay, thank you. I will let the family that get in contact with you and your team.
So Colette, I don't see any other hands up at the moment, but I have a couple of questions. So first of all, I just want to clarify, when you say CPP, life skills and communication classes, obviously learning disabilities falls under communication exceptionality. Does that mean that self-contained learning disabilities classes will be taking place in person?
So to clarify, when I talk about communications classes, we're talking about that's a particular type of program offered to kindergarten and grade 1, or sorry, not to kindergarten up to grade 3, right, Sean? I'm looking at Sean. Yep, nodding. Okay, good. Kindergarten up to grade 3. These are students that are learning alternative communication methods. So these are largely nonverbal students. Going back to the checklist that Sean described, these would be students on the alternate curriculum, not on the Ontario curriculum, that really wouldn't have the ability, given their profile. So it's not a communication identification, but a communication class to learn how to communicate. Given their profile, they would not be able to access the learning remotely. So I appreciate there's kind of a similar language, but certainly we're talking about two very different things.
So basically, just to clarify, students with learning disabilities and or ADHD will not be back in person at this time.
So I would say that as a self-contained class,
Yep.
they're not a part of that blanket group based on the range of profiles within those classes, and that going back again to that checklist that Sean described, most of the students, I would think, wouldn't meet the criteria laid out for being invited to learn in person. But that's not to say that if a principal applies that checklist and someone with ADHD or someone in an LD class does meet the criteria, of course they could certainly be invited in. But we're always kind of drawing back to that criteria for in-person learning, again with the goal to balance the vast majority of our students learning remotely, and really only identifying those select students who cannot access the learning and would regress significantly, invite those students to learn in person.
Okay, great, thank you. And just to clarify, I mean, obviously we're talking about a short term, we hope, until January the 17th. I mean, that's one period of time that we're looking at, and I'm sure that most of us around the table here can say that, we're obviously, we'll do whatever is necessary to get through the next 10 days, 2 weeks, whatever. But I'm sure that many families are very concerned about what happens if we go longer. And we're certainly hearing from families already about those. I guess I have a couple of questions that relate to that. We know that many of our students with learning disabilities and or ADHD do not do well online, and struggle with attention, focus, a whole range of issues. For those students that are in high school, is there any policy or decisions made about how much, we're coming up to summatives and exams, whether this period of 10 days, 2 weeks is going to be counted in terms of their mark generation for their credits? Has that been given any thought at this time?
So certainly there are lots of issues that have yet to be resolved, although we've started some of the discussions, but our priority was over these past 2 days was to ensure our schools are ready to deliver learning both remotely and in person starting tomorrow. So certainly one of the things that we are talking about is the final 30. So we know that there's only 3 weeks, I think, left in this semester. And so it is, as you describe, an important time. We call this what we call protected time, where we make sure that there's no activities that are pulling kids out of the classroom or staff out of the classroom, because it's such an important time leading up to this final 30. So we are talking as a senior team about what the final 30 may look like and what flexibility we have. And so there will be communication going out to our secondary students and families in the coming, I don't want to put a timeline on it, but soon, to respond to some of these questions. But I do want to say that you know, we recognize that this is an incredibly difficult time for many of our families and our students, and it is a really difficult time for our staff as well, both as a professional and as for many who are parents. So I would say that wherever we land with the final 30, and when it's called final 30 is it's the last 30% of their mark, our staff are taking a very flexible and will be taking a very flexible and compassionate approach, and making sure that that they're providing every possible support to students who are struggling during this time. And I say that both from a mental health perspective and an academic perspective, and that all measures that are available to schools, such as the staff in the student success department, the guidance department, our special education staff in schools, will support students, and they will access processes to promote student success. So whether that's the credit recovery or the final 30 that I've just spoken about. So it's you know, something that we're thinking very seriously about to ensure that that students are supported and that they get through these final three weeks with success. But what you know the support looks like would really vary for each specific student, and so I would really encourage families, if they're concerned about their progress of their student in secondary as they lead into these final weeks of the first semester, that they reach out to the school, reach out to the teacher, and really collaborate on what supports are most appropriate and effective as they emerge, because we know that what's presenting today may look different in a week or 2 weeks. So,
are there any other questions for Colette at this time? Kathy.
Sorry, I'm pressing the wrong button. So when you said that, so you did say prior, it was also the Student Pathways program, correct? That is in person? Okay, I just want to clarify, because that's the one I have concern. My person I'm talking about had concerns that her program's not opening up tomorrow.
Okay.
For options for in-person. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I'd be happy to look into that if you want to, if you flip that to me.
Yes, she's very stressed because her child definitely needs to be in person, because she's on alternative autism behaviors a lot. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Okay, any other questions at this time? Well, I'd just like to say, you know, on behalf of, I think, of all the team here, that we, you know, we recognize this is a truly difficult time. We're dealing with something that we haven't seen before. I mean, we've been in this for 2 years now, but it's never quite been like this. And I really want our educators to know, and the staff in the school system, that We're truly appreciative of everything they do, recognizing that they often are putting their own health and safety at risk. So really grateful for everything that they do in supporting our students. So thank you very much. Okay, so at this time, Lorna, do we have, oh, sorry, just checking back. I had a little, I think, was anybody got a hand up? No, okay. Are there any questions from the public at this time, Lorna?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay, great, thank you. So we're now at item 4.0, communications to SEAC, superintendent's report. I know that you've obviously talked us through a lot of the major issues for tonight, but Colette, if there's anything you want to add?
Yeah, I just have a couple of things. One piece of good news that I'd love to share is that the Halton Hills Council recently approved that their Active service, which is a service that provides transportation to seniors and to individuals with disabilities in the community, to transport their clients to Oakville Hospital. So up to this point, they only provided transportation within the Halton Hills area, and they have recently expanded their service to Oakville Hospital, which is, of course, great for their clients, but for our students who participate in Project Search at Oakville Hospital, now are able to access Active to get to Project Search. And for our students, this is now the second or third year of this program, and it has been a barrier for some of our students in Halton Hills to participate in the program, or it's been a burden for families to get them there because there's no public transportation from Halton Hills to the Oakville Hospital. And so it's a huge bonus for Halton Hills families that Active will now transport our students to the hospital site. Another exciting piece of news is that LC McGill Secondary School is scheduled to move into their completed new school for second semester. And this will also be the site, the seventh site of a Community Pathways program beginning in September 2022. So the school will begin transitioning some students, the incoming grade 9s and 10s into the school, some of those then transferring from the CPP program into the LC McGill program. So that work will begin in the coming months. And given that LC McGill doesn't offer, or won't be offering at this point in time, although certainly as their population grows it may change, but they won't be offering essential level programming, students seeking the CPP program with integration into essentials would be assigned to CK. But outside of that, we have a boundary that divides Milton in two for the CPP program. So that's very exciting for us to move forward with that and open it up in September. The last bit of news is that the Ontario Autism Entry to School program has appointed Aaron Oak as a partner to work with the school board on a new initiative that provides an intensive 6-month program prior to a student's start to school. And then they work closely with the students assigned school as they enter for the next 6 months while they're in school. So this is an exciting new program that the ministry is funding, and Aaron Oak will be our partner in this work. And much to learn about it, given its newness, but we're really excited about this for our students entering the system with autism. And lastly, I just want to echo Allison's comments and really acknowledge the work of our special education staff who will be supporting our students in person starting tomorrow. We know that this is really a significant step for both of our students and our staff, and certainly fraught with worries and stress, and but also I know that that these individuals are incredibly dedicated to the students they work with, and are doing it because they are so committed to the students. So I just want to echo Allison's appreciation to our staff who will be working in person starting tomorrow.
Great. Does anybody have any questions for Colette at this time? No. Okay. So we now have our association reports, item 4.2. Please could you indicate in the chat box if you would like to speak and add anything for your association. While we're waiting, see if anybody else would like to add anything, just wanted to let you know that the early bird deadline for the Learning Disabilities Association's annual Educators Conference is coming up on the 31st of January. We have a wonderful lineup of 16 speakers in 4 streams talking about best practice, to support students with learning disabilities, ADHD, mental health issues, and are really looking forward to a wonderful educational opportunity. And we certainly thank the Halton District School Board for supporting us and sending many staff members on to a conference as part of their professional development. But if anybody's interested, please look on our website, www.ldahh.ca, for the early bird discount that ends on January the 31st. Any other comments from associations or statements that people would like to make? Okay, or that not being the case, item 4.3, the trustee report.
Hello, everyone. I will get us started through you, Madam Chair. Happy 2022 to one and all. We're sure off to an interesting start. Here's to a good one on the horizon. The board's first meeting of the year is tomorrow evening, and it's very likely that the focus will be on a number of these items that have been raised tonight related to the return to school. Of course, driven by the province's late in the holiday break announcements and by the latest wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. And as has been acknowledged, staff, families, students, all under enormous stress. So it is a good time to do all we can for each other to pull together and be together as a community and get through this in the best way we can. I understand that the staff in schools were distributing technology today to students in need as best as possible, and getting ready for that return to online or virtual learning tomorrow and or in-person learning. If we look back to December, the board approved additional use of board surplus of up to $5.5 million, bringing the total drawdown on our surplus to about $11 million. And this is largely to address pressures related to COVID-19. And in our report that appears in the minutes, we'll include links to all of these reports that we're going to mention. Next, a number of opportunities were identified for the community planning partnerships in schools. So those are schools that have surplus capacity and upcoming new builds where community partners may find opportunities to join together with the board for their constituents or members. My understanding is that these opportunities, while they can be investigated now, they're largely going to be, or they will wholly be put on hold during the pandemic. And anyone who's interested in seeing the different committees that trustees have been appointed to for the upcoming year can reference a report that will include the link to, or some may also be interested in how the annual school year calendar is created. And there is a report from the last meeting that will include the reference, so you can check it out. It's amazing how many stakeholders come together and to determine what the school year calendar will be for the next year. And that work is going to take place in February-ish timeframe, I believe. So I'm happy to answer questions, and Heather has our second part. Go ahead.
Thank you, and Happy New Year to everyone. As Milton continues to grow, so do we continue to build new schools. However, the pandemic is still causing us a lot of grief in terms of getting our schools built quickly. But our facilities people and the construction crews are doing the best that they can. The delay in opening Milton 11 and 12 continues to impact students. We're going to be redirecting students to the best that we can and try to mitigate some of the impact, but it will be in a report attached as well. The members of the community are invited to contribute possible names for the new school. And there's an online form that can be accessed, and we'll attach it to the, and it's on the board website as well. And we really love having the community submit names. We also especially love when the students submit names. Student voice is really important. The new high school, as Colette mentioned, Elsie McGill in Milton, is on track to take partial occupancy by semester 2. And we're really looking forward to it. I've had a walkthrough a while back. I'll have a chance to go again probably later this month. And it's super impressive. The safety of the students and the staff is paramount and will be continuously monitored, as the construction teams will remain on site for the coming months to get it completely finished. But staff and students won't be in that area. So looking forward to that. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask Tracy or I.
Great, thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions at this time? Okay, great. So we're now at item 4.4, committee reports. So I'm going to go through a list of the standing committees and ask for any updates from our SEAC reps on these committees. The first one being the Parent Involvement Committee. So any update from that committee? No. Accessibility Coordinating Committee.
No updates at this time, Alison.
Great, thank you, Lou. Equity and Inclusive Education Advisory Steering Committee.
No updates at this time, Alison.
Great, thank you. And finally, the Mental Health and Wellbeing Strategy Steering and Advisory Committee.
We had the first introductory meeting of the committee in December, and we will have our first meeting actually in the new year in January. So we'll report back.
Great. Thank you very much, Eileen. So now we're at item 5.0, our next agenda or order paper. Are there any items that committee members would like added to our upcoming agendas? We do have a number of items that we're planning to bring to the committee, including reports of programs that are running. And then obviously we start the process fairly shortly. We hope we start the process fairly shortly of budgets and special education plan reviews. But is there anything in particular that anybody would like to have added to the agendas in the upcoming months? Okay, not at this time, but if somebody does think of something that they would like to add, please feel free to send me or Colette, Lorna a message, and we will see if we can have it added to the agenda. Okay, that now brings us to item 6.0, which is in fact the adjournment of our meeting. So once again, I'd like to thank everybody for their participation this evening. I know that it is a very stressful time for everybody at this time, educators, students, parents, associations, administration. But as was mentioned before, if we all pull together, hopefully this will be over in a couple of weeks and we can get our children back to school and back to the learning environment that we know they need to be successful in. So I wish you all the best start to the new year. And with that, at